So this is what Megan would be like if that movie were rated R, kinda. Abigail. So Abigail is brought to us by the creative team of Radio Silence. They're the minds behind Scream 5 and 6, as well as Ready or Not, which I have not seen, but I really want to now. And this movie is actually a reimagining of Dracula's Daughter, which I didn't even know until earlier this morning. That's not a spoiler. You might think it is, but it's not. So in the movie Abigail, we have a crew of bandits. They're sent on a job. They have to kidnap this little girl named Abigail. And so now the situation is they have her in this mansion of a house because her father's filthy rich, so ultimately they're holding his daughter for ransom. However, this crew soon realizes that this little girl is not locked in the house with them. They're locked in this house with her, because it turns out this little girl happens to be a vicious vampire. And now she's gonna slaughter them all one by one and pick them off, and here we go. We got ourselves another vampire horror movie slaughterfest. And a pretty damn fun one at that. Seriously, this movie is awesome. Starting with, but not ending with, the fact that we got Melissa Barrera in the lead. Right there, that's a win. It's funny, I've seen her in quite a few horror movies now. By that I mean Scream 5 and 6 and now this. That I still think it's funny that the first time I ever saw her in a movie was In the Heights, which is a musical and she can sing, but let's face it, Melissa Barrera is now a scream queen. She's really proven now that she is a force to be reckoned with. She's a really good actress, and Scream 7's gonna tank because they lost her. Yeah, she's great in this movie. She's the heart and soul of it. You sympathize with her. Her character, who goes by the name Joey, she actually has a little more depth to her than you might expect from a movie like this. In fact, so does everyone else. Dan Stevens is pretty much the other one of the crew that stands out. And man, okay, between Godzilla, Kong, The New Empire, and now Abigail, I'm now pretty much like, yeah, Dan Stevens, that's a fun guy to watch. No, I did not just call him a mushroom. I called him a fun guy. He's got that charisma. Well, he pretty much chews scenery. That's what he does. And specifically in this movie, there are a couple of times in his performance that he kind of reminded me of Jared Leto. Like a more charismatic version of Jared Leto, if I can say it like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy for thinking that. Maybe it was the way he was acting. Maybe it was his American accent. Maybe it was his lankiness. I don't know. There's just something Leto-like about his performance here. That's not even a bad thing. I'm just saying. All right, moving on to the title character here. Young Abigail, played by Alicia Weir. Whoa, talk about a breakout performance. This kid is scary beyond all reason. You've heard this in other reviews of this movie by now, but it is true. She is good at playing that scared little girl, but since you know the premise and you've seen the trailer, you already know you're waiting for that flip. And man, when it happens, again, everything you've heard is true. She is awesome.
I'm sorry about what's gonna happen to you.
This little ballerina vampire kid is one scary little bastard. And yeah, like I said, this does kind of remind me of Megan if it were rated R. I mean, you have this little girl who kills people and she dances. There you go. But hey, you know what? Megan was one of my favorite movies of last year. I still love that movie. So me comparing Abigail to Megan, that is not a bad thing. In fact, that's a great thing. Because this movie does kind of have the same kind of fun that Megan does. Except it's rated R now. So there's a lot more F-bombs and a lot more gore. Oh my god. I'll get to that in a minute. Talking about the movie itself, this is one of those fun, slaughtery kind of horror movies where, you know, the first half of the movie is the setup and the characters are actually a little more fleshed out than you might expect, which is always a plus. I mean, like I said, you got Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Catherine Newton. We know she's been good in horror movies before. Plus, you got a guy that looks an awful lot like Elon Musk, in my opinion, so that's super scary right there. But like I said, you got the setup. Things seem like they could be going fine, but you're just waiting for that flip. You're waiting in anticipation for shit to hit the fan, and once it does, there's no going back. And the movie becomes a bloody great time. The horror elements in this movie, I mean, yeah, there are jump scares. Oh my god. The first one in the movie really got me good. I was like, holy shit! I actually kind of jumped like that in my movie theater seat. And after that, I was like, alright, they're gonna be jump scares. I'm gonna cover my ears for like whenever it gets really silent. Yep, the ears are getting covered. There are quite a few jump scares in this movie, I'm not gonna lie. But this being like a fun kind of horror movie, you know, it's not like The Conjuring where it's like really trying to scare the living shit out of you. No, it's here to have fun. So yeah, jump scares. But to be fair, there are also some pretty suspenseful scenes. So that's good too. And yeah, I touched on this a little bit already. Now I'm gonna dive into it. The gore. Oh wow. Yeah, don't let the first half of this movie fool you. Like the first half, there's little to no gore. And I was thinking, alright, maybe this isn't gonna be that bad. Oh, no, it is. Complete gore fest this movie is. Holy fuck. Which, yeah, I know that all of Radio Silence's recent hits are, but now I know for sure that that's a staple of Radio Silence at this point. Radio Silence is doing another movie. All right, we can rely on it now to have copious amounts of red. It's a given. So just know that going into this movie. I mean, there are even some gross scenes. I never really had to shield my eyes, but I was like doing this shit. I was clenching up. That's what I was doing. I was clutching my knees, which means the movie's really effective. Good job, Abigail. And on top of all of this, the movie's also pretty funny. There's some funny dialogue in this movie. I laughed out loud a couple of times. Also kind of broke my heart when Angus Cloud came on screen. screen and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. He's no longer with us. Rest in peace, dude. Gone way too young. Holy shit. His character, I would say, is the most comic relief. He's the stoner. So yeah, some pretty funny moments from him, especially with Catherine Newton. So with good fleshed out characters, a fun vibe, some great violence, and an awesome villainous character in Abigail, rounding it all out is an unexpectedly awesome musical score composed by Brian Tyler. Seriously, some of the scenes in this movie, like you hear the strings going in the background with some harp, I was like, whoa. Brian Tyler coming out and showing us what he's made of with Abigail. There were a couple scenes where the score actually stood out as like something to be noticed here. That's awesome. It's the last thing I was expecting from this horror movie that's coming out in April. But hey, as a big soundtrack head, who am I to say no to something like that? Guys, in the end, I had a great time with this movie. I love the premise. I love the vibe, the atmosphere and tone of it all. It is scary. It does make you squirm. At least it made me squirm. It's funny. It's got good characters and good dialogue, which will, let's face it, separate the good horror movies from the bad ones. This one just landed with me. I know now that radio silence is a force to be reckoned with in terms of horror movies these days. I apologize for taking this long to realize that. Now I'm gonna go watch Ready or Not, because I hear it's fantastic too. Plus, it's getting a sequel, so might as well watch it. But as for Abigail, I will say, go see this movie right now. Yeah, I'd totally be down to watch this movie again. And we got ourselves a pretty big weekend in terms of movies now. We also got The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which I'm gonna see next. And also Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. I will be watching and reviewing both those movies over the next few days, so be on the lookout. Hit subscribe. So Abigail, have you seen this movie yet? What are your thoughts on it? And what is your favorite radio silence movie so far? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, well, thank you for subscribing. Now if you'll excuse me, well, I guess I better go watch Ready or Not, since that's what I said I'm gonna do. Peace!